Dune 3 is coming out. Dune 3 seems to be pretty prophetic because it predicted a union of Catholicism and Islam, and we're seeing that play out right before our very eyes this very week. And it was mentioned in the Vatican II documents in the 1960s explicitly. We can see that Leo has fallen on the side of the dialectic that's saying we need Chrislam, we need the alliance of Islam and Christianity. And again, he didn't just go visit mosques and say that mosques are spaces proper to the worship of God. He also signed another joint declaration with the imams there, signing what's called the Golden Book in one of the largest mosques there in Algiers. And this is relevant because we're beginning to see perhaps what Frank Herbert foresaw. Now, Frank Herbert was more than just a science fiction author, the author, of course, of the Dune series. He was also, at some level, I want to say, a neocon, perhaps, speechwriter for the GOP and for certain GOP elites. I think that's right. And he also studied quite a bit of perennial philosophy and syncretism and comparative religion. And he foresaw in those stories, if you're not aware, and Dune 3 is coming out very soon, by the way, he foresaw a union of Islam and Catholicism. Isn't that fascinating? And now what's being pushed openly is Chrislam by the Pope. Welcome to the fourth hour of the Alex Jones Show. I'm your guest host, Jay Dyer of Jay's Analysis. And we've had a wild past few days, maybe even past week, on Instagram, on X, on the news, on everywhere online has gone insane over the fact that the Pope recently announced quite an alliance with Islam as he visited various mosques in Algiers. Now, what's funny is that not only did he say that he thought that the West should be less fearful Islam and that now mosques are proper spaces dedicated to God, this is absolutely antithetical to everything that the history of the Catholic Church, for example, the way it positioned itself throughout the Middle Ages in opposition to Islam, in opposition to the taking over of the Holy Land by Muslims, thus launching several crusades for the purpose of bringing the Holy Land back under the sway of Christian kings and emperors and so forth. All of that has been pretty much undone by the post-1960s Vatican II revolution in the Roman Catholic Church through the documents of Vatican II, such as Nostra Aetate and Lumen Gentium. Both of those documents contain within them significant chapters and sections that deal with the opening up, you could say, of the attitude of what the church is and who God's people are, to now include any group that professes any kind of generic theism or perhaps even deism. The book, or the documents of Vatican II, specify that now Roman Catholics, Muslims, and Jews all worship the same God together, and that the plan of salvation now includes Islam. That's the terminology explicitly from Vatican II. What's wild about this, again, is the radical departure from the attitude that the church had throughout the Middle Ages. Now, on top of that, this is taking place, that is, Pope Leo's discussions and statements, at the same time as there's Christian persecution by Islam by Western proxy Islamic groups in places like Nigeria and Sudan and Syria, where we saw, for example, the installing of Jolani and the destruction of countless Orthodox, Catholic, and other Christian groups in Syria, the oldest sites of Christianity. Syrian Antioch is where the Christians are first called Christians in the book of Acts. And in the midst of all of this, Pope Leo comes out and says, we must be less fearful of Islam. As we are told, we should open our borders and accept more migrants. We just saw in Spain, the Roman Catholic Church affirmed and agreed with the importation of hundreds of thousands of new migrants. And this is all, of course, by design to destroy the existing European peoples and their nation states. This was admitted about a century ago or more in the Kalergi plan by Count Coudenhove Kalergi. He wrote a book called Practical Idealism. And in that book, he says that we will breed out through bringing in countless foreign groups and entities, particularly Muslims, into Europe to destroy the existing people group. He says then they will be, quote, mongrelized, his words, and there will be a Jewish supremacy that will arise out of this. That's not my words, that's his words in Practical Idealism. This plan of Kalergi was presented to the Royal Society elites, and they said, we like your plan, and we like Lord Lionel Curtis's plan of the Commonwealth of God, a kind of generic socialist federation along the lines of Cecil Rhodes and John Ruskin's plan for a new order of the world. So all of these plans and discussions and theories that people mention, is it the British Empire, is it the Rothschilds and their Zionist approach? It's all of those things together. They all synthesize very well together. At the same time, we had a woman throughout all the large Roman Catholic websites like LifeSite News. Her name was Liz Yore, and she gave a talk at a recent conservative Catholic event. And as I guess she's a journalist or something to do with the pro-life organizations, and she used to work with Catholic Charities. And she said that Catholic Charities is not the only entity responsible for the importation and destruction of the borders in the US and in the West. She says that the Catholic Church itself and its dioceses and its bishops are openly, adamantly supporting this importation, and they make tremendous amounts of money from it. Now, there's a monetary angle to it, but there's also a longer, larger technocratic socialist plan to reshape the nations, to reshape the continents into socialist unions. We're going to talk about where that plan comes from and who planned it, how old that plan is here in a moment when we look at some of these texts that we have. But I also wanted to mention that Leo had a pretty wild statement where he said that the reason that Muslims and Christians can get together is because, quote, we both share a view of Mary that leads to communion. He says, quote, communion between Christians and Muslims takes shape under the mantle of Our Lady of Africa. Here in Algeria, the maternal love of Lala Maryam, or maybe Lala Rona, gathers everyone as children with rich diversity, with shared aspiration of dignity, love, justice, and peace. Communion is a specific term that has to do with sharing in the body and blood of Christ. It's a Eucharistic, sacramental reality. So for him to use that terminology with Muslims who don't believe in anything like that at all is absolutely bizarre and intentional, I would argue. Just like when Vatican II says that Muslims, Christians, and Jews all worship the same God, the assumption is kind of like a Freemasonic teaching that we're all on the same path, and all those religions are now salvific and can lead to our final goal. Thus, it really negates the person of Christ. Remember, Jesus said in John 14, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. In 1 John 2, verses 20 to 22, it says that if you reject the Son, you don't get the Father. So anyone who rejects Christ as the Messiah does not have the Father. And I have to wonder if these people know anything about Islam, because Islam explicitly says Allah is not a father and has no sons. He doesn't have human sons. He doesn't have a son of God. So Allah is explicitly not the God of Jesus and not the God of the Christians, according to the Muslims. So this is a really preposterous, ultimately Freemasonic teaching that all the religions are really just masks of the same generic theism or generic deity. And I think that it also comes in the context of this bizarre back and forth that we're having between Trump, his administration, and the people within it, and the papacy. So it's hard to figure out like exactly what's going on here. There was this story that Cardinal Christoph back in January was invited to the Pentagon and spoke to several members of Trump's administration. And there was reportedly tense words exchanged and perhaps even intimidation and, quote, threats. We don't know exactly what was said, but allegedly, according to news reports, there were discussions of the Avignon papacy as a reminder to the Pope who really runs things. That's a reference to the time when the Western Church was under what's called the Great Western Captivity in the Middle Ages. And this has to do with about 70 years where the seat of Peter moved from Rome to France, Avignon, France. And at that point, it was under almost a century of French kings controlling and running the papacy, the supposed chair of Peter in France. It eventually went back to Rome, but the reference appears to have been a coded or perhaps not even coded statement that the state is who's running things. And perhaps because this is an American Pope, he was being reminded that you're an American and the Pentagon, the State Department, and the elites that control it are running things. So Francis and Leo might have spoken out against wars, but the position that they're giving against the wars isn't the historic Roman Catholic position on just war. They might argue that it's not a just war. But Leo went so far as to say that no wars waged in the name of God have anything to do with righteousness, and God doesn't hear any of those prayers when you wage war in the name of God. He must not be familiar with all of those Old Testament passages where war was waged in the name of God, and he must have forgotten that his own papacy waged many wars in the Middle Ages, including the Papal States itself having many of its own wars and its own standing army, particularly during the Medici period. Pope Alexander VI had his own standing army. All of that is erased because the papacy has decided now that it's in a kind of socialist, technocratic, pro-WEF, pro-globalist era of its papacy. But that doesn't mean that I have to then say, well, then Donald Trump is right, and we must go to war for Israel, and we must do everything that Israel wants. I had a debate with Andrew Meyer, a guy that is a nice guy. We met him in person. He came on my channel the other day, and we did a debate on whether or not this was in the best interests of America to go to war in Iran. And it wasn't really about Israel. But the funny thing is that as soon as, for example, the oil was seized in the Maduro operation, that oil, according to mainstream news reports, went directly to Israel. So the oil that is supposedly for some of these apologists the basis for why we're engaging in these operations, including the Maduro event and the exfiltration of him, as well as the Iran event, is supposedly to help shore up American oil interests and to help number go up for GDP. Now, I don't think that's really helping anything. It's an absurd line of argumentation. And that line of argumentation, as we see many of the Trump apologists laying out, really this is, I think, devaluing humanity at the expense of the GDP. This is what Pam Bondi said, right? Who cares about Epstein if number go up, if GDP go up? So who cares if we're run by PDF pedophile elites, if the elites are compromising and controlling politicians? Who cares? Because number go up. Well, number's not even going up. And plus, if the dollar is inflated into oblivion and collapses, the number will always go up because there will always be more dollars printed, and you can always inflate and give the impression that the economy is doing well through all of this trickery. But we all know that it's not doing well, and anyone under the age of boomer basically can't buy a house or own property or plan for any kind of normal family lifestyle, and that's all by design. The plans, of course, are to destroy the economy, eventually to transition us into some kind of global economy, and all of that was again discussed at Bilderberg, as we saw this week. And Dan Dix did a great coverage of that. Alex had Dan Dix on. That was a great show. If you missed it, I would say go watch that, because no one covered Bilderberg. Dan Dix, myself on YouTube, Alex talking to Dan Dix, and Jason Burmis. That was it. No one else covered Bilderberg, because apparently all of that went away, right? Once Trump got in, oh, it's all fixed. Bilderberg doesn't matter anymore. There's no such thing as elite steering committees, technocrats, et cetera, zillionaires running things. No, they all stepped down because Trump. And yet in the last 8 months to a year, we've seen a disastrous turn by the Trump administration for the worse, particularly pivoting at the point of saying that who cares about Epstein? You're not MAGA if you want to know about Epstein, if you want people prosecuted, you're low IQ. And then we get a blasphemous presentation of Trump as Jesus healing people in their sick beds, healing the boomers as they lay on their sick beds from COVID and the stabbies that they got and the boosters. And of course, no, this isn't Jesus. This is just Trump as a doctor. I don't know doctors that wear red Jesus robes, but apparently it's supposed to be just a doctor with the hosts of heaven behind him. All of this is absurd. And I think we see a sort of megalomaniacal turn, which is very unfortunate because we did see so many good things happening. So we have to remember there were a lot of good actions and a lot of good movements early on, but things have turned for the worse, and it has to oftentimes do with foreign policy, because once we get to that issue, we realize that we are not as free as we thought we were. And we are quickly reminded of the oligarchical elite in the background that still run and still control things. The overall agenda still marches forward. As Theo Vaughn said, we got politicians and Dalai Lamas slurping on kids, and nobody is saying anything about it. Everyone's acting like this is business as usual. Theo Vaughn was 100% correct. Now, what does this mean? It means that we cannot fix things, and we cannot assume that some single politician has the means and the ability to overturn a massive centuries-long oligarchy that has entrenched itself mainly through money printing and through the Federal Reserve banking system. That can't be undone by one guy in one or two administrations. So we shouldn't have unrealistic expectations of any single politician getting all of that done. But beyond that, it's really not even about Trump himself, right? I think mature, educated adults should be able to go by the issues, right? Instead of being on teams. It's almost like UFC or something, or again, back to WWF. We're not on teams, we're on issues, and that's the most important thing. And if Trump's wrong about warp speed, if he's wrong about the Epstein files, if he's wrong about Iran, then we have to disagree with those issues. But you've got people who essentially adopted a cult attitude that you can't disagree, or you can't criticize issues or positions without suddenly being anti-MAGA, or you're not a true American, you're a traitor, you're a foreign agent and an operative. And so we have to be careful of all these traps and the false dialectics. Again, one of those dialectics is, well, if I disagree with the Iran war, and if I disagree with the Zionist position and the need to go to war for Israel, then I must choose Islam as an aid, as an ally. Islam is not an ally. In fact, Islam, as many of the rabbis say, and Zionists say, is the broom of Judaism. It's the thing that comes in and clears the way for what Jews believe will be a future Jewish supremacy and a Jewish state run out of Jerusalem or perhaps Tel Aviv that will be the center of the world in the future. That's the Jewish supremacy attitude, going all the way back to ancient rabbinic traditions about the nation state of Israel and their Messiah that's not Christ. Or perhaps Moses Hess, the founder of modern Zionism in its political reality, and also the father of modern utopian socialism. Those two things go together. Now, I don't have to choose between Tony Soprano and the five families of New York, right? Why do I have to? That's a false choice. But everybody seems so easily duped into, well, I either have to choose Laura Loomer or Sniko. It's only two options. There's no other possible options. What about the Christian option? What about an Orthodox Christian option that's not Zionism or Islam, that's not Mossad or Hamas? Like, what about some other option? Maybe we should start thinking outside of these basic bitch dialectics that everybody falls into. And again, Trump will be out of office in not that long. And then what? Are we going to be members of some new cult? Are we going to be in the Gavin Newsom cult, the Kamala cult, the Big Mike cult? It's all absurd. The only way to fix things is to understand that the real power structure is the oligarchical elite that control things at a corporate and banking level. Everybody has now conveniently forgotten the whole Epstein fiasco. And that was partly, I think, why the timing, I know that the war was planned before Epstein, but the timing of the war suddenly put Epstein on the back burner or out of everyone's minds when it was the biggest story in decades. And it was easily removed via a sudden war that was supposedly necessary. Why? Because of an imminent threat, but that's been an imminent threat for how many decades, according to Netanyahu? They are 2 weeks away from a bomb. And then 5 years later, they're 2 weeks away from bomb. Five years later, they're 2 weeks away from bomb. So every 5 years, they're 2 weeks away from a bomb. And it's the same model of Oded Yanon. It's the same model of the clean break strategy. And it's the same model of the 7 Nations plan that Wesley Clark talked about. It's the same plan. There might be modifications to specific operations in specific countries, because if you compare Oded Yanon to clean break, some of the nations listed change and some of the plans change a bit. But overall, it's the same strategy and the same plan. And it's the same reason why we did what we did in Iraq. It's the same reason why we did what we did in Syria. And it all ties back to 9/11. And cui bono, who gains from 9/11? Well, certainly not Americans and not the so-called petrodollar. Now, I do want to remind everybody that there will be a big debate this weekend, and this is hosted by a couple of Tucker's producers. And if you go to my X account, you'll see at the top of it, or very near the top of it, there is a live debate in Nashville this weekend. This will actually tie into some of the things that we're discussing right now, but I will be live debating 2 Freemasons, one of whom is Chase Geiser. You may have heard of Chase Geiser. He's former InfoWars host. I think he's moved on to do other things. I'm not exactly sure what he's up to. I'm not criticizing him or dissing him, just saying we did agree to do a public formal debate with me versus him and his friend. And that will be live in Nashville this weekend. Saturday, April 18th at 6 p.m. And you can get tickets to that. It may be sold out, or it may be nearing sold out. It's not a massive venue. It probably holds 100, 150 people. But you can get those tickets if you go to my X account at the very top. And there's the image and the link. Now, to get back to the subject that we're discussing, which is the globalist turn, we can see that Leo has fallen on the side of the dialectic that's saying we need Chrislam. We need the alliance of Islam and Christianity. And again, he didn't just go visit mosques and say that mosques are spaces proper to the worship of God. He also signed another joint declaration with the imams there, signing what's called the Golden Book in one of the largest mosques there in Algiers. And this is relevant because we're beginning to see perhaps what Frank Herbert foresaw. Now, Frank Herbert was more than just a science fiction author, the author, of course, of the Dune series. He was also, at some level, I want to say, a neocon, perhaps, speechwriter for the GOP and for certain GOP elites. I think that's right. And he also studied quite a bit of perennial philosophy and syncretism and comparative religion. And he foresaw in those stories, if you're not aware, and Dune 3 is coming out very soon, by the way, he foresaw a union of Islam and Catholicism. Isn't that fascinating? And now what's being pushed openly is Chrislam by the Pope. We're going to talk about Dune, the predictive programming in Dune, and Chrislam when we come back after this break. This is the Alex Jones Show. I'm your guest host, Jay Dyer of jaysanalysis.com.
Now, coming up in just the next month or so, it looks like this is finally it. They're finally going to be able to shut down InfoWars, but they won't shut you down as InfoWarriors, and that term and that name lives forever. The InfoWar lives forever. In the potential twilight of InfoWars itself, as Infowars.com, we've launched a limited edition line of the InfoWars 1776 limited edition line. A whole bunch of new shirts, a whole bunch of new hats that are limited edition that take a lot of the classic InfoWars shirts. This is the all-time bestseller, navy blue with red InfoWars on it. and adding on the shoulder 1776. These are historic shirts, and they're symbols of your support and your being part of this operation and helping the operation grow and expand into the future. This is personally one of my favorite shirts in the new line. Now here's the classic InfoWars logo on a white shirt. Never done black on white. Seems like we should have. Looks great. Got the 1776 on the shoulder. You are literally funding and supporting and wearing your uniform in the fight to defeat the globalists. InfoWars is 28 years old. America is 250. And look at the back of this clean shirt. USA 250, 1776 forever. Semi-quintennial, that means 250, baby. America's birthday with badass hats as well. And then, of course, we've got the new limited edition, America at 250 years old. And the back of these shirts are amazing Americana. And I designed this, the Betsy Ross flag with 250 on it. Get yours now, thealexstone.com. I'm back because I forgot one point that I want to be very clear about. This is a fundraiser. We need funds to continue on and the new operation. It's urgent. These are historic shirts. You've taken the info this far. Please take action now. For those of you who've been on the fence over body thing, thealexstone.com, but have shared links and things, I appreciate you, but come on, folks. We're the tip of the spear. We need you. We need your support. You're the tip of the spear. Thank you so much.
Welcome back to the fourth hour of the Alex Jones Show. I'm your guest host, Jay Dyer of jaysanalysis.com. Be sure and follow me on X. You can also find my YouTube channel. I just hit 200,000 subscribers. So I want to remind you that we do cover this material, this type of material and more on a regular, consistent basis. I do live streams almost every day or two on my channel. It's a lot of fun. We got a growing community over there. So come join me at Jay's Analysis or Jay Dyer on YouTube. We're talking about the move towards Islam, and I mentioned Frank Herbert and his background and the philosophy that he put into the Dune novels. And as the series progresses, it gets more and more wild and more abstract and esoteric, but also perhaps prophetic. Again, within the Dune story, we have not just this idea of a future where the AI takes over and eventually gets banned. They had to do what they called a Butlerian jihad against AI. But the reason they had to do a Butlerian jihad is also because there's a union between the Roman Catholic Church of the future and Islam. And they have a new Bible that's called the Orange Catholic Bible, which includes a lot of Sufi and Islamic indigenous sort of prayers. It's almost a kind of triad of syncretism of Islam, Sufism, and Catholicism and paganism altogether. And Frank Herbert, I think, foresaw the possibility that this might be a potential future religion, a future religion that could in some way perhaps prepare the way for the universe's super being, the Kwisatz Haderach, as it's called in the novel. If we translate that into reality, that would, of course, be a kind of antichrist. Now, remember, Islam is predicated on the idea that Allah has no sons and Christ is just a human man. He's merely a prophet, a good guy, but a mere prophet. According to 1 John, that's actually the spirit of Antichrist. To deny the deity of the Son of God in classical Christian theology for the last 2,000 years, and according to 1 John chapter 2, means that you really surrendered the essence of Christianity. This is why the First Ecumenical Council at Nicaea solidified the doctrine that the Son is homoousios, or equally divine with the Father. That means he's fully God. He is eternally begotten of the Father, and thus his natural sonship is the means by which we become sons of God through baptism. That's Paul's teaching in Galatians 3. So to deny those ideas would then be to put one outside of classical Christianity and, according to 1 John 2, of the spirit of Antichrist. So I understand that, for example, Tucker's idea is perhaps to drive a wedge between this plan that perhaps Zionist or Rabbinic Judaism has to use Islam as a way to go to war against the Christian West to wipe out what they consider Edom or Rome. But the problem is that you can't make an alliance with Antichrist against another Antichrist. We know that Rabbinic Judaism hates Christianity. It's open about that. It always has been in its Talmud and in its teachings codified since the 3rd, 4th, 5th century onwards. But it doesn't make Islam suddenly a friend of Christianity, because Islam appears to say that we're friendly, and we have this shared idea that Jesus is a prophet and Mary is a virgin. Yeah, but Jesus isn't just a prophet. And to say that he's just a prophet is, again, an antichrist spirit, according to 1 John 2. So this is really fundamental to understand that you can't make an alliance with Antichrist as if you're going to join with Tony Soprano against the five families. It's not Christian. It's not Orthodox. It doesn't work. It's not going to be a feasible system. And Islam, for example, is all about child brides. It's all about all kinds of degenerate practices. And so the mask of morality that it has is really that. It's a mask. It's a performative religion. It's Sniko going and praying in public and showing himself at Mecca on his phone so everybody sees him doing religious works. It's performative. It's not an internal transformation of the man by grace. That's why Islam is a religion of externals explicitly. And they also teach in the Quran that you have absolutely every right when you're in the minority to smile with your face, but hate them in your heart. And when it's strict Orthodox Islam, they believe that they have a duty to rid the world of idolaters, and including Trinitarians. If you believe in the Trinity, you're an idolater, according to Islam. So the nice face that many Muslims, cultural Muslims, secular society Muslims put on is a temporary face until they gain the upper hand, and then they believe that you are to be put under subjugation. The Quran actually teaches this, as do the Hadiths. It's not just the Quran, it's the Hadith traditions as well. And on top of that, we have to understand, which never gets brought up, except that now it begins to be brought up more on X because people keep sort of pushing the issue. Nobody's talking about the fact that the Muslim groups that are the most horrendous typically are the ones fostered by Western intelligence agencies like the CIA and the Mossad. They're the ones propping up people like Jilani, Assad, or excuse me, to take down Assad, ISIS, Al Qaeda, et cetera. Those are all Western proxy groups. And I think the same thing is going on with probably with Boko Haram and those African groups that are terrorizing the Christians there. It's the same Western strategy of tension to fund and use these groups as proxies. So where was Pope Leo on any of that? If he wanted to call out the problems of America and the Trump administration and so forth, then he could go all the way back to funding and supporting radical Islam. But he did probably the worst possible thing, which was to say, actually, maybe we should be BFF with Islam. Maybe we need to buddy up with Islam. Maybe we need to let more migrants into Europe. This is insane. And the papacy itself, the Vatican has a giant Leonine wall built centuries ago around it to keep people out. I've been to the Vatican. When you go to the Vatican, there's Secret Service everywhere. It's preposterous. It's insane levels of hypocrisy, because they're not letting all of these migrants come live in the Vatican. I mean, I might listen to your moral virtue signaling and your moral blackmail if you actually operated this way. But they don't operate this way. And that's because the Vatican is a long captured institution. Who's it captured by? Well, turns out we've been lecturing through several elite books on my channel for a long time. For 10 years, we've lectured through the top elite establishment books. No one else does this. Mine is the only channel that consistently lectures through about 70 now in the last decade, top writings of the elite. And all of these books say exactly what they're doing. I just did a very long interview with the very popular musician and commenter Zuby. We did an hour-long interview today about who the elite are and how does Epstein give us a window into that power structure. Well, everybody's already forgot about Epstein. And the same oligarchs that are united with Epstein just met at Bilderberg. And what do they talk about? Were they talking about Trump memes and this and that? No, that's fodder for people to yap about and tweet about, which everybody will forget in a week anyway. But the oligarchical technocratic agenda keeps marching on because we don't look at those people and focus on those people running things behind the scene, but also in public. So they're semi-hidden and semi-public. And I think the elite figured out a while back that that's actually a better method than having a totally secret society way to run things or being totally out in public. Just make it semi-private, where you have public groups like Bilderberg, CFR, Trilateral, IMF, World Bank, Brookings Institute, on and on and on. Rand Corporation, thousands of think tanks, NGOs, foundations, steering committees, those run things. And you notice you don't vote for any of them. They don't change. They stay there. The CFR was set up in the 1920s by the Rockefellers. Has anybody voted for the CFR? And yet you've had countless CFR members be heads of the CIA, heads of the OSS, heads of every possible government agency you could think of. That's who is the permanent breakaway national security establishment that runs things. And you're always given to the fodder and the puppets and the people in the front that you think run things. And then you vote the rascals out and you get a new batch of rascals that do all the same stuff. And when are we going to figure out that nothing changes because the system is set up so that nothing changes? That's the reality of things. It's the old boy networks like the OSS and the CIA that we've been lecturing about on my channel. Again, no one else lectures to these books. Why are more people not coming and watching my channel and what I talk about? I don't understand. Everybody will watch every possible idiot influencer out there, but they won't come and listen to the elites themselves telling you how the world works and how they run things. And you might be surprised to know that they actually tell you everything in the books. And not just in these books, but also in the fiction books. Books like Dune, right? Dune 3 is coming out. Dune 3 seems to be pretty prophetic because it predicted a union of Catholicism and Islam. And we're seeing that play out right before our very eyes this very week. And it was mentioned in the Vatican II documents in the 1960s explicitly. So when we study these people and when we look at things like the Bilderberg Group, Daniel Esselin's classic book, of course, Esselin has been on Alex Jones countless times for 2 decades or more. I just did a lengthy interview with Daniel Esselin that will be going up pretty soon. And I talked to him about all of this, and we came to the same conclusion that Epstein is a window into elite organized crime structures that operate on an international Spectre level scale like you see in James Bond. Also this week, my really long in-depth interview on John Kiriaku's show will be going up. So I'd encourage you to go watch that because we went very deep as well. And I took a lot of these questions to John as a probably, the most prominent CIA whistleblower who blew the whistle on the torture program and then was prosecuted by the Obama administration for doing that and went through quite a bit to be, persecuted for standing up for what was right. And I took a lot of these questions to John. I said, I want to know what you think. Do you think that I'm right when I give this analysis and when I talk about these elite texts and so forth? And he said, absolutely. I interviewed Colonel Douglas McGregor a while back, and we had the exact same conversation about the global elites and their plans. And he said, you're absolutely correct. WEF, Davos, all of these entities are pushing for this technocratic agenda. And it doesn't matter what politicians come and go. Those things don't change. Why? Because we're actually run by this supranational, international elite. A huge faction of it obviously is Zionist. And that's why things don't change. So we've got to focus on Bilderberg and we got to focus on CFR and trilateral and all these things because that's who really runs things. It's not Donald Trump calling the shots on everything, even though there's an appearance that Donald Trump calls the shots on everything. And Trump seems to think that he's infallible, impeccable, and he can't lose and he can only win. Well, pride goes before a fall. And God has a tendency to humble people who get extremely arrogant like that. So I don't hate Donald Trump or anything like that. I would like to see the country flourish. I'd like to see us get back on track where we were, prior to this last 8 months or year of going off the rails. So we got to look at Bilderberg. We got to look at the Federal Reserve because those are the entities that don't get voted out, that don't change. Doesn't matter if the Federal Reserve head comes and goes. The Federal Reserve itself is the problem. It controls and hijacks the nation and its productivity and its monetary power through the fiat fractional reserve banking system. And guess what? All of these books admit that. When Carol Quigley wrote Tragedy and Hope, he spent the first 200-300 pages talking about the fractional reserve banking system and how it controls the nations and how the Rothschilds figure out that that was a great way to, for example, in the 1700s, through the Paribas system, control France. And then they expanded to the Bank of England. And they expanded elsewhere through proxies like JP Morgan. So this is the real power structure. It's not a conspiracy theory when they admit it in their books. It would be a theory if there wasn't evidence to back it up. It's not a theory when the people involved in it admit it. And we all know this from lower level criminal stuff, right? People know that criminals like to brag. They're very braggadocious. They're very narcissistic. They crave the attention and the praise from getting away with it. Serial killers, we know that serial killers do this. Well, guess what? People at the level of a Kissinger and a Brzezinski and these people, they do the same thing. It's just that they're smarter than Jeffrey Dahmer or any of these other people. They brag about it in their 500, 600 page books, which nobody reads. So they know that nobody's going to do anything and nobody's going to care, because most people are not going to speak out against something like that because they'll be perceived as oddballs, crazy, kooks, or whatever. So the CIA invented the term conspiracy theorist during the JFK event to castigate anyone who would question it as some immediate nutball. And that was all admitted and declassified recently, by the way, or readmitted via the JFK files. But, we saw this turn, I think, with the JFK files, which is interesting that people have already forgotten about that one. When we saw James Jesus Angleton, the Israeliophile operative of the CIA, essentially kind of what looks to be moved the CIA away from more of an Arab contact setting towards an Israeliophile setting. We know that, for example, under Angleton, there was a backdoor channel with the Mossad where a lot of those declassifications showed he was passing intelligence to them, unbeknownst even to the rest of the CIA. And that's because he had commitments to the World Zionist League at that time, thinking that that would be a way to win the Cold War. If they could get Israel on board with the CIA's approach, then they could defeat Stalin and the NKVD. That was the thought process or his reasoning there. But then what happens is that sort of puts you in league with that entity, and then you become more and more on the hook to Israel. And then what happens is, we saw the JFK event. You see the rise of AIPAC after that. And then you see more and more influence on American foreign policy through those kinds of interests. So that's how we got into the dilemma that we're in. And to even talk about those things for so many decades was actually just a no-no. You couldn't even talk about that, much less think about it. And now we're seeing legislation being pushed, of course, to try to criminalize even mentioning or talking about that in various states in the United States. So that tells you right there that that's exactly what's going on. They wouldn't criminalize it if it wasn't a real problem and a real threat. So how do we get out from under this? Well, we got to figure out how to expose and not to be under international, unaccountable, unelected bureaucrats and NGOs and think tanks and foundations that have the ability to change laws and lawmakers through lobbying or whatever, or just bypass the law and do whatever they want because they're outside of regional law prosecution or whatever, right? International institutions have that power, that ability. They can escape, they can get away from regional prosecution. So we have to understand that we're under international control and influence that's not just located in one specific area or region. It's international corporations, international banks, and they hold countries hostage through things like IMF debt and IMF loans. And those loans come with stipulations that if you take that money, you're now beholden to a lot of Western ideas and Western power and influence. So once again, what is that? That's the banking system. That's the central banking, private banking model. That's the real locus of power. If they didn't have that, the rest of it would fall apart. But that's the real locus of power, and we still have not figured that out, right? People thought, oh, well, we got Doge in, and Doge is investigating USAID, and that's all great. But that's just one, arm of the leg of the octopus. And when you cut that one off, there's 20 other arms. So yeah, it's good to cut one major funder and covert operations thing like USAID, but they just create another one, right? So who though? Well, it's the head of the octopus. You can't just cut off one arm. It's the whole thing, right? You can't just cut off one of the heads, one of the snakes on Medusa's head. She'll just grow another one. It's Medusa's head itself, which is the oligarchical elite that I'm talking about. So people at Bilderberg, and the fact that there was only 3 people at Bilderberg protesting it and exposing it shows us that we haven't really come that far, unfortunately. Don't mean to be blackpilling. I'm just making the point that we want to change things. We want to fix things. Well, the technocratic agenda marches on, and Donald Trump was not a stop at all to that agenda. And they want a CBDC. They want a controlled digital universal fiat currency that the private central banks can snatch out of your wallet at any moment, your crypto wallet. I'm not talking about Bitcoin. I'm talking about crypto CBDC, two totally different things. That's what they want. They want a centralized control mechanism, not a decentralized digital currency. That's why they don't like Bitcoin. And you saw, for example, even with Trump, right? We heard, oh, it's strategic Bitcoin reserve. Never happened. What do we get? Oh, let's have stable coins and a stable coin fiat reserve. But that's not what we originally heard about. We heard about Bitcoin, and that shifted over into stable coins. That's not Bitcoin. It's something else. So what's the overall plan? Well, we saw when Dan Dix did his report that Bilderberg wants to focus on AI and tech and control. You saw Palantir related people involved in that Bilderberg discussion. Again, stuff that Theo Vaughn has called out on various podcasts, stuff that has been, exposed as involved in all kinds of conflicts, surveillance, overstepping people's privacy, all part of an idea to create a tracking, tracing, total information awareness grid. And if you read a 0 to 1, Peter Thiel's book, he says that, this was all created for the NSA and for total control, supposedly to fight terror. Well, who's going to be the terrorists of the future? Who are they saying is the terrorists? Well, it turns out Klaus told us this in Cyber Polygon. He said, anyone in alternative media who questions the narratives. And when we have a Cyber Polygon, Klaus said, all of those who oppose the system's solutions are the terrorists. So that's who the terrorists are, anyone who's opposing the system. The NATO cognitive warfare document said the exact same thing. The future terrorists are those who oppose NATO's cognitive warfare, which includes drones, Skynet, implantable nanotech, etc., and the changing of the biology of the human itself through genetic experimentation and through gene therapies. Right, the NATO document says that those are the terrorists. If you oppose it, you're the terrorist. Not Al-Qaeda, not ISIS. That's not the terrorists of the future. The terrorists of the future are the masses who don't want this stuff shoved down their throat. So we cannot lose focus and lose sight on the fact that the socialist international Fabian technocracy is what will continue to march forward. That is the CBDC WEF plan. That's the Davos plan. That's the Bilderberg plan. They're the same. You've got people from Bilderberg going and being the political heads of Canada. Like, this is what's really going on. This is who's running things. And only 3 people were protesting it. That's insane to me. I remember years ago, and Alex said this to Dan Dix, there would be 4,000 people protesting Bilderberg. What has happened? Because Trump got elected, we suddenly have, none of those things matter. There is no Bilderberg anymore because Trump got elected. That's crazy. We totally lost sight of who's really running things because we have this sort of puppet show that gives the appearance of opposition, but it's like WWF, right? We can't forget that party politics itself will never really be a long-term solution. You might run as an independent or as a GOP locally and get elected and do some good. I'm not saying you can't do that, but I think at the national level, you have to understand that international politics is probably never going to change because it's essentially controlled by people with tremendous amounts of money, billionaires, right? Adelson level billions of dollars is what really calls the shots in DC politics, not Jimmy Stewart in that movie, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, right? Where Mr. Smith decides that the fat cats are corrupt in Washington, and why, by golly, he marches there and gets elected and gives them what for. Okay, that's not how it works. Okay, you don't do that. And I think in that movie, if you watch, it's pretty funny. It's so unrealistic. He gets the Boy Scouts to help him print up papers that expose the corruption. I mean, it's almost absurd satire with how silly it is. No, we have to focus on Bilderberg. We have to think about the, when you watch Dune 3 when it comes out, I'm looking forward to it. But think about who's really running things behind the scene, right? Who are the Bene Gesserits? And who's really running Baron Harkonnen and the Emperor and all these people from the background? It's a shadow elite. And that shadow elite is an oligarchy that doesn't go away with this or that election. Be sure and go to the Alex Jones store and support Alex there and get all those products. And follow me, Jay Dyer, on all the social media outlets.
Everything I sell to you works. Obviously, that's the goal, so that you get it and you like it and you want to get it again. Everything I sell to you, we put deep research into and I personally use. Now, I've been promoting zeolites for decades with great sponsors because they really work. I want to tell you what they are. Well, Bigley, our sponsor, has a really high quality, private label, top selling brand that we were able to private label. We're bringing to you right now. With the unprecedented toxins in the environment, with the chemtrailing, all the garbage in the food, it is more important than ever to take zeolites on a regular basis, but not all zeolites are created equal. This is really a high quality zeolite. Please do your own research and then go to the AlexJonesStore.com and secure our high quality zeolite formula. Now let's go over just some of the incredible facts. We're swimming in toxins every single day. Metals from the air, chemicals in the food and water. Your body needs help binding and eliminating this garbage before it builds up and destroys your cells. Enter Zeolite Detox Defense, advanced binding agent. This isn't some gimmick. Zeolite is a naturally occurring volcanic mineral with a unique cage-like crystalline structure that acts like a molecular trap. Through ion exchange and absorption, it selectively grabs positively charged toxins, heavy metals, ammonia, and other unwanted compounds while letting beneficial minerals stay put. Then it escorts them straight out of your system through your gut. Paired with folic acid, it also supports healthy mineral transport and cleaner internal environment. Users report feeling lighter, more balanced, and clear-headed with consistent daily use. Just one dose a day gives you 60 full servings of detox support. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't steer you wrong. You know that. If you love our methylene blue, if you love our bovine colostrum, if you love the other incredible products like our T3 iodine, you are going to love this zeolite detox formula. Secure yours now at thealexjonesstore.com. And if you haven't checked out the other supplements like our methylene red, that's proprietary to us, our ultramethylene blue, that is on record the strongest and the best, then check it out today. And while you're there, check out the widest selection of Patriot apparel, baseball caps, t-shirts, hoodies, you name it, to spread the word of freedom in America and worldwide. Bottom line, thanks for keeping us on the air over the years. We're facing some of the biggest challenges ever to stay on the air, but thanks to you standing with us as our partners in the info war, we are stronger than ever. So thank you so much for your support. Now please visit the AlexJonesStore.com today. And if you want to get massive discounts on all the supplements, sign up as a subscriber, lock in your orders in the future. You can cancel any time, so all you're really locking in is the massive discounts. Same thing with VIPs, cancel any time, $30 a month, get $40 to spend in the store, special deals, special offers, special sales on everything. So if you're buying anything at the AlexJonesStore.com, you should be a VIP. Thank you so much for your support. Now secure your zeolite formula now at the AlexJonesStore.com. I know you're the big health guy. You're way better shape than I am. Don't kick my ass. I've seen you working out with the Liver King. You say you've taken methylene blue before. I want you to take our medical grade. It takes 30 minutes to kick in. So good for your body. I'd like you to drink this, Jay. You said earlier what? I appreciate it. I want to get your true review. It doesn't work? Tell me. Here it is, brother. Cheers. It looks just like the stuff from Doom, the water of life. He's drinking the juice of a strangled, drowned sandworm right now. Baron Harkonnen is not happy. We're going to see what happens.
20 minutes later.
I feel like my brain is clearer and working faster. It feels like my brain and my energy have had the accelerator hit on them. I felt it in my brain and my energy.
Well,
I like it. I'm going to get me some before I leave.
We're going to give you a couple bottles of it, bro. We love it. It's amazing. Get yours now, thealexjonesstore.com.